Okay, we are now broadcasting. Hello, everyone. My name is Joe Wachunas. Welcome to our webinar on solar plus EVs. It's great to have you all here tonight. Such a pleasure. I'm going to start sharing my screen as our other participants and panelists come on board. Great. So solar plus EVs. Again, I'm Joe Wachunas. I'm a program manager here at Solar Oregon. I hope that everyone is staying healthy and safe and finding silver linings in this time of COVID and unprecedented challenges. We are so thankful that you're here with us tonight, and we're really excited to be talking about this topic. Let me tell you a little bit about Solar Oregon. We're a nonprofit, a 501c3 nonprofit. We've been around for 40 years. We educate on solar and clean energy, energy efficiency. We do things like basics of solar, when times are normal, solar homes tours, and net zero homes tours. Excuse me, let me go back to here. Sorry. And excuse me, solarized campaigns and peer-to-peer education. When I was thinking of appropriate metaphors for solar plus EV, I thought, hey, they go together like peanut butter and jelly, milk and cookies, mac and cheese, Nutella, and anything. And all kidding aside, I find myself personally very fortunate to both in my personal and professional life have solar and electric vehicles as part of it. I work both for Solar Oregon and Forth. We'll be hearing a lot from the nonprofit Forth tonight that promotes electric vehicles. And I'm lucky enough to have an electric vehicle, which I took a picture of this morning, charging outside with the my extension cord going across my sidewalk. And then I hopped on my roof and took a picture of my solar panels. And I can tell you there's no greater feeling than having your car being charged by the sun. So a lot of our panelists will be exploring that synergy tonight, and I'm excited to hear about it. Hopefully you're not too sick of this time of webinars yet, because we've got a couple exciting ones coming up in the weeks and months ahead. I want to let you know about a webinar we're doing on Earth Day next Wednesday, April 22nd at 12 p.m. It's going to be our basics of solar. This is our deep dive into the process of going solar. There's been no better time than now to go solar, and we'll put that in the chat room for you. So we hope you can join us on Earth Day. Next month we have other webinars like the Electrified City. That'll be in mid-May. We're doing a resilience webinar, which is very appropriate for these times in late May. We're excited to be partnering with Solar Power World and the American Solar Energy Society for a solar shingles webinar on June 4th, and then a late June webinar on solar panel recycling. Please let us know in the chat if there are any technical difficulties in hearing us. So let's talk a little bit about the answering questions and the chat tonight. So at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you should have a Q&A button. Please feel free to ask your Q&A with that box. And then there's also the chat where you can put in general thoughts and comments, and we'll do our best to respond in real time for that. Okay. So we'll also be sending some polls out tonight, and we will be polling you on different topics and questions. So for example, I'm going to send a poll real quick, and let's see if it works. Our first poll is, do you own an electric car? So go ahead and respond. I'll give it a couple seconds. And also, do you have solar and EVs? We're very excited to know. And while you're doing that, I'm going to make sure I go ahead and take a minute on that. And one of our panelists is still trying to join. Great, I'll give you about 10 more seconds, then we'll close that poll. Okay. Great. So I'm going to share the results. Looks like 32% do have an electric car and 52% don't, and 16% have both. So that's exciting stuff. Great. Let me go back to here. Finally, we would be remiss if we didn't have a Solar Oregon event without having a membership pitch. So we hope that Solar Oregon is a member-based organization, and we rely and count on our members to help support us. For membership costs $40. You get tons of benefits. If you go to solaroregon.org, we'll put it in the chat. You can become a member, and we so appreciate it. And thank you to all our members who are here tonight. Let me introduce my panelists real quick. Our tonight's guests are Kelly Yearick. She's from the nonprofit Fourth. She'll be talking about her EV 101 and personal story. John Morris from D+R International. He will be talking about utilities and charging. Carey Booth from Reed. She'll be a solar and EV ambassador, and then we'll have some time for audience Q&A. Great. So with that, I'm going to actually turn it over to Kelly. Kelly Yearick is a program manager at Fourth, and Kelly leads consumer engagement and demonstration programs designed to increase adoption and access to electric vehicles. She also manages programs related to Fourth's role as the backstop aggregator for the Oregon Clean Fuels Program to design and implement transportation electrification programs with utilities across Oregon. Kelly holds a master's in environmental management and sustainability from Portland State University and sits on the board of Solar Oregon, where she's board president-elect. So Kelly, I'll let you take it away.
Great. Thanks, Joe, for the great introduction. So as Joe said, my name's Kelly Yearick, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about my organization. But first, I want to acknowledge that I'm here representing both two organizations. Certainly thrilled to be representing Solar Oregon tonight. So I just want to pay an homage to that. And with this photo, this is my home in the background with solar panels sitting on the top there, and then our electric vehicle in front. And one thing I really love about Solar Oregon is our real dedication to sharing our solar stories. And so just very briefly, I'll share that when we moved to Portland about 5 years ago, we moved onto a street where nearly every house on the street already had solar panels, with the exception of ours. And my background in environmental science and real commitment to environmental justice got me really motivated to join the rest of the solar crew on my street. And so it took a few attempts, and we went through a few different solar installers before we found the right one. But we've had solar panels on our house for about 2 years now. And then we added an electric vehicle to our household last April, so actually just about a year ago. And so we're really thrilled at the impact this has had on our ability to minimize our footprint, as you will, in maximizing the amount of renewable energy that we can use to, or create to offset our energy use, and now also be using to power and charge up our car every night. So with that, I will kind of shift into my presentation tonight, which is just going to be covering some of the basics of electric vehicles. And as Joe mentioned, there'll be plenty of time for questions, both at the end of my presentation and at the end of all the presentations tonight. So about my organization, I work for a nonprofit called Fourth, and we're a nonprofit that's based here in Portland, and our mission is to advocate for the advancement of electric, shared, and smart mobility. We do this in 4 areas, one being consumer engagement, which is kind of similar to what I'm doing here tonight, just spreading the word through education and outreach about electric transportation. And tonight I'll be focusing in on electric vehicles. And so I want to start with some of the benefits of EVs, or electric vehicles as we call them. So given our connection with solar tonight, I definitely want to lead the conversation with the environmental benefits that are associated with electric vehicles. So this chart is a little bit confusing at first when you look at it, but what I really want to hone us into looking at is the Pacific Northwest, and specifically here in Oregon. And what this figure is representing is the miles per gallon that a gas car would need to get to be lower in carbon emissions than an electric vehicle that's powered by electricity in a given power grid. So here in the Pacific Northwest, a lot of our energy comes from hydropower, and some of our energy comes from solar, of course. And so with that, powering an electric vehicle is a very clean way to power our transportation sector in general. And so the benefits of EVs make a lot of sense in terms of the environmental impacts. And moving on to some of the financial side of things. So electric vehicles are also cheaper to drive and operate than their gasoline counterparts. And what's being shown here is kind of the difference between an average gallon of gasoline, which this figure is a little bit outdated as gas prices have dropped in the recent month that we find ourselves in, but electricity is still about a third to a quarter as expensive as gasoline in comparison. So in fuel costs alone, electric vehicles are going to be much cheaper to operate over time. And we also don't really expect our electricity prices to fluctuate. And so that's one additional consideration that you might have if you're considering switching your fuel to being on electricity. In addition to operating the cars, they're also cheaper to maintain than a comparable gas vehicle. So for example, the average cost to operate an electric vehicle in the United States is just under $500 per year, while the average cost to operate a gas-powered vehicle is just over $1,100. Electric vehicles have many fewer moving parts, which means you're never gonna go get another oil change again. Some of the maintenance that you might expect, I'll go ahead and jump ahead to the next slide, for an electric vehicle are things like tire rotations, getting new windshield wiper fluid refilled, maybe some air filters for the cabin, brake pads, and then the brakes themselves actually tend to last a lot longer than traditional gas cars because of this technology that's called regenerative braking. And just to kind of clarify what this slide is getting at, so the benefits on the left there are for fully electric vehicles, and those on the right are for what we call PHEVs, or plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. And so I'm going to get into the specifics of those two things in just a few moments, but for plug-in hybrid vehicles, the maintenance expectations are pretty similar to a traditional gas car. But the frequency of those service requirements is going to be lower, most likely. And so then what about just kind of upfront direct costs associated with electric vehicles? So they are often considered to be, and they are in many cases, more expensive than a similar gas car. But there are a lot of incentives both at the federal and the state level here in Oregon that can help offset some of those costs. So for example, the federal tax credit will allow up to $7,500 off the purchase of a new or leased plug-in electric vehicle. And in Oregon, we also have two rebates that are available. One is a standard rebate that's $2,500 off, and every Oregonian qualifies for that rebate. There are a few caveats to it that I don't want to get into the details of tonight, but my email will be attached to this presentation so you can follow up with any questions you have. And then in addition to that standard rebate, there's what's called the charge ahead rebate in Oregon, which allows for an additional $2,500 off a new plug-in electric vehicle, but it can also be applied to the purchase of a used plug-in electric vehicle. Which is a fantastic benefit that we're really lucky to have here in Oregon, because used electric vehicles hold their value really well, but they also are a great solution and a great way for people to kind of get their feet wet into the electric vehicle space. And then a lot of times utilities will have additional incentives that you might be able to take advantage of, whether it's kind of helping bringing down the cost of purchasing a charging station for your home or some other type of incentive. There are often other incentives that can be stacked onto those state rebates and the federal tax credit. And I'm going to skip over this slide for now, but it will be in my slide deck. All right, so moving on to the different types of electric vehicles. So when we say a battery electric vehicle, what we mean is it's a fully electric vehicle. The benefit of that is that there is no gas engine involved. You'll never have to get gas. You'll never have to change the oil in this car. And also there are no tailpipe emissions. There is no tailpipe in a fully electric car. So a few examples of this are the Chevy Bolt, which is the one that's pictured there in the upper left corner. All of the Tesla models that you might be familiar with or see driving around, those are all also battery electric vehicles. Another example is the Volkswagen e-Golf. But many automakers now are making fully electric vehicle options. And then we get into what we call plug-in hybrid vehicles, and there are two different types of plug-in hybrid vehicles, and really the differences come down to how the drivetrain is built into the car. So I'm not really going to get into the nitty-gritty details here in this presentation because I want to make sure we leave time for our other presenters. But there are lots of options when it comes to plug-in hybrid vehicles, both in the new and the used market. Some examples that you've probably seen are the plug-in Prius Prime, which is a plug-in hybrid vehicle that gets about 25 miles of pure electric range, but then it gets about 620 miles on the gas tank afterwards. So it's an incredibly efficient car. But if you have a pretty short commute, it's a really great option to still be able to drive on only electricity part of the time. Another example of a plug-in hybrid vehicle that's readily available here in Oregon is the BMW i3, which is pictured there on the bottom. And the latest model year of the i3, I believe, is getting upwards of 160 miles of electric range. And then it also comes with a range extender that allows you to get about 50 to 100 additional miles on gasoline, kind of as a backup in case you run out of battery. So speaking of running out of battery, one thing that's of course different from a gas car to an electric vehicle is how you fuel it. So you're fueling it with electricity, as we all probably know. A lot of times that is done at home. So about 80% of EV owners do that charging at home. However, that's often not enough, especially if you do a lot of road trips, or if you don't have access to charging at home. There's also a lot of public charging stations in Oregon. I think I have a slide in my presentation later that shows some of the charging stations that we have around here in Oregon, but if not, you can take my word for it. There are a lot more than you think there might be, but sometimes we don't see them because they're not as well advertised per se as a gas station is, as we're accustomed to seeing on the side of the highway. But one really interesting fact that I love sharing with people about electric cars is that they can be charged by plugging into your standard wall outlet. You don't actually need any fancy equipment to charge them. As long as you've got access to a plug, you can charge an electric car. And that's really cool. So there are 3 levels of charging. If you are going to plug it into the wall, like I mentioned, that's going to get you what we're calling level 1 charging. So this is going to be fairly slow, but it's great if you do have a lot of time to hang out, or if you have a really short commute. Like I mentioned with the Prius Prime, for example, just 25 miles of electric range, you can easily get that back by plugging it in overnight, and even less than overnight for that example. So that's what we call level 1, and that occurs on a 120 volt outlet. Then when you get into a faster level of charging, we call it level 2. That could happen at home or in public. This requires a 220 or 240 volt outlet, which is essentially a dryer plug if you think of it that way in terms of what you might have capacity for in your home already. And So you can get this outlet itself installed in your home. A lot of electric cars these days are not only coming standard with a level 1 capability of charging, but actually capable of charging level 2 with the plug that actually comes with the car. So sometimes you don't even need to buy a separate piece of equipment. You can just use the plug that comes with your car directly from the manufacturer, and get, anywhere between 12 and 40 miles per hour. Certainly this is going to be able to recoup a longer amount of commuting distance traveled within just a few hours. All right, and then there's what we call level 3 or DC fast charging. And these types of charging stations are only ever going to be found in public. They charge very quickly. You can expect to get about 80% of your charge back in under an hour for almost every electric vehicle model that's out there. One thing to keep in mind when it comes to DC fast charging is that this is where the type of car that you drive actually matters, because when we get into the DC fast charging, the plugs actually vary from manufacturer to manufacturer. And while the industry is starting to transition into having one standard, for now there are still a few options out there. So it's just important to consider that if you are thinking about purchasing an electric vehicle, do a little bit of research, maybe contact me or someone else at Forth, and we can help make sure that you have all the tools to understand what public charging might look like for you. And then a few other things to consider before we jump into seeing what all the options are out there for you. So things that impact your range, and range is another word that we use to talk about how far you can go on a single charge of battery. And a lot of it really just comes down to your driving style. So if you're driving really fast, say on the highway, for example, you might experience that your range is going to drop a little bit. So electric vehicles are actually kind of the opposite from traditional gas cars, in that they're actually more efficient off of the highway in city driving, whereas the gas car is more efficient driving on the highway. And so because of that, you just want to be considerate of the way that you're driving, really being conservative, and also the amount of accessories that you use. So the climate control, for example, is one. So cranking up the heat or cranking up the air conditioning when it's hot or cold outside is going to be a lot harder on the battery than it would be for a gas car. So a perfect example of that is the heat. In a gas car, you pretty much get heat for free. The car doesn't have to try very hard. But in an electric vehicle, there isn't an engine that's kind of creating this natural source of heat. And so the car has to use the battery power to create that heat. And so whenever you have to do that, you're going to see some of the range decrease a little bit. But one thing that I personally love about electric vehicles as a great solution to this is that they all are pretty much coming standard these days with heated seats and heated steering wheels. And you'll actually be surprised at how much of an impact that can have on your comfort level, especially if you're the only person riding in the car. So with that, I think that's all I want to say. Again, please feel free to contact me with any other questions. I know we'll have time at the end of my presentation as well. I think I'm going to jump into, yes, the options that are available. So we have over 40 different models of plug-in cars available here in Oregon. I'm just going to highlight a few here that you've probably seen around the streets, but in case you haven't, I'll show them here. And then also a few cars that are coming out either this year or in future years. So I already talked about the Chevy Bolt, but they actually have up to the range of the car for the 2020 model year. So now it is getting about 260 electric miles on a charge, and it starts at just under $37,000. And then we have the Nissan Leaf. As you can see in this photo, they've recently updated the body style of this car, and they actually have two versions of it now. So there's the standard Leaf, which gets about 150 electric miles, and then there's also a Leaf Plus version, which gets about just under 230 electric miles. And then moving on to the Kia Niro. So this is a kind of a newer electric vehicle option out there, getting a comparable range to the Leaf Plus, and just a little bit less than the newest version of the Chevy Bolt. And then another option that's actually a plug-in hybrid here to highlight is the Mitsubishi Outlander. So this is a great plug-in hybrid vehicle especially for people that do a lot of outdoor activities, like many of us in Oregon, because it's got a larger kind of cabin for hauling around a lot of things, but then it's also got some of those like all-wheel drive capabilities that a lot of electric vehicles aren't coming necessarily standard with these days. I already mentioned the i3, so I'll just pass that one because I know I've taken way more of my time than I should have. And then I think finally, this is the last one that's available this year. Tesla just released its Model Y. They've started delivering those as of March. That's the latest version to come out of the Tesla automaker, which is an automaker that's sort of changing the way we sell and think about selling cars. Got a really non-traditional sales method. Okay, and then coming soon, I promise I'm almost done. So I am personally really thrilled to see this year the first electric pickup truck coming to market. Rivian, that's pictured here, is one of them that is slated to hit the streets this year. There are a couple other automakers that are making claims, such as Tesla, that they'll be introducing a truck this year as well. But I think within the next 3 to 5 years, we'll have electric truck offerings from nearly all the automakers that are in the pickup truck space currently. And they have a pretty significant range. So they're guaranteeing about 400 electric miles from the Rivian R1T pickup truck. The Ford Mustang Mach-E is also supposedly coming out this year. They've already taken reservations on it. So that's a pretty exciting one for coming from another American automaker. I should say Rivian is an American company. And then a few years from now, I think we might see, supposedly we will see the Volkswagen ID Buzz, so the electric bus coming from Volkswagen. And Volkswagen's actually introducing a lot of new all-electric models into the market in, I think this year, but certainly in the years to come. So we'll be seeing more from that automaker. All right, I'm gonna stop there. I apologize that I've taken way more of my time than I was supposed to do.
That was so great. Thank you so much, Kelly. Yeah, so we'll do a couple minutes of clarifying questions for Kelly, and I'll also just quickly introduce tonight my colleague, Zach Snyder. You'll see him on the line. He'll be helping field questions and commenting on the chat. And then also Whit Jameson from Fourth will be helping answer technical questions as well. So we do have one question, Kelly, and other panelists. Does it matter if you charge when the battery is only down a little, or wait until the battery is down to 0?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's one that I think there's still some debate on in the industry as to what's the best. What I was told when I purchased my car was that you really don't need to charge it fully every night. And that the battery is really going to be in a really good kind of sweet spot when it's in between, I think, like 30% charge and 80% charge. And so certainly you don't need to charge it every day. And I've also heard that it's good every so often to actually let your battery fully deplete and kind of reset and then give it a full charge again.
Great. We have another question. Is anyone building an electric convertible?
Ooh. Not that I'm aware of. I don't know if any of the other panelists have seen that.
No, I haven't seen that yet.
Okay.
And Joe, we've got one more question that's coming through on the chat. What level 2 charger gets 40 miles per hour? Haven't seen anything over 20 miles per hour.
Oh. Okay, I think that might be a perfect one to tap Whit in for.
Charging expert at Whit, are you there?
Hi, yeah, I'm here. So there are quite a few companies that actually manufacture chargers that can charge faster than 25 miles of range per hour of charge. However, most electric vehicles that are not Teslas are hardware limited on their onboard charging to about 25 miles of range per hour of charge. Some vehicles, such as Tesla, can charge up to more like 40 or 50 miles of range per hour of charge. So yeah,
Is this on the slower charge or the faster level 3 charging that they're limited?
that's only on AC charging. So that's level 2 charging for that.
Gotcha. Great. Let's see. If folks, again, if you have questions, just put in the Q&A. Otherwise, we'll move on to our next panelist, and we'll have more questions at the end for Kelly. Thanks so much, Kelly. Great. So my next panelist is John Morris. John has been working with utilities since 2004. His career was focused on delivering energy efficiency programs to clients such as BPA, NEA, and Energy Trust of Oregon. Since 2014, John has been focusing on the role of electric vehicles within the utility industry. Today, John serves as the Senior Director of Electric Transportation for D+R International. John leads the business development efforts for Choose EV, an international utility education platform with over 550 utilities across the United States and Canada. And John has also served on the board of Forth for the past 5 years. At Forth, John is on the executive committee. So yeah, John, take it away.
Great, thank you very much. Very excited and happy to be on the call. It's far and few between the opportunities I get to kind of rub shoulders with the solar crew. So be gentle with me. I'm not as well versed on solar as I probably should be. Having a utility background that really was based in energy efficiency for the last 13 years. And I moved over to that kind of transportation energy nexus in about 2014 and been really kind of diving deep there for that amount of time. So I really wanted to just kind of share with you all kind of what we're doing in the utility space specifically to kind of help utilities be that trusted advisor for helping their members really understand the value and benefit of switching to an electric vehicle. Going to walk through some key terms as it relates to the interactions between vehicles and the grid. And then I'll kind of share some things that I've been observing in the industry as utilities start to kind of navigate through the grid evolution, if you will. And then I'll leave you with an image of a kind of future state of what I think residential buildings and solar and transportation can look like when it's all merged together. And I'll be sure to leave a majority of that conversation, I think, for Carey to cover. But for me, again, it's really all about kind of helping you all understand how utilities are moving into the space. So like I said, we work with utilities all across the country and Canada. Our motto really is to leave no utility behind. And our goal is to really create a consistent educational platform so that customers, new car buyers, used car buyers are all really kind of getting their answers, the questions answered in the same similar way. So having that consistency really allows people to make decisions faster, smarter, and hopefully all making good decisions to purchase EV. So here's kind of some snapshots of digital content tools that we provide specifically for utilities. I selected some of our clients in Oregon to kind of highlight the different tools that we build. I know Kelly had shown a picture of a calculator, and it's really important for people that are going to buy a car to see how much they can actually save. And we provide a level of customization that is really going to show up exactly on the member's utility bill. So we're doing calculations on a local gas price and a local kWh rate from the utility. We allow the customer to kind of put in the miles that they would travel every day, and we let them compare the gas costs to the electricity costs. And we can even slice and dice it, not to compare just against gas to BEVs, but also give people the opportunity to kind of compare gas to PHEV. So that way they can kind of test any model that's currently on the market today. We track the fuel consumption data, I think from 1990 1990 back, every model that's made from 1990 and above. And then so that helps people kind of see what their current car ICE vehicle looks like. And then we also let them compare that with any new EV that's currently available anywhere in the country. So that's kind of the savings calculator that we built for Clatskanie PUD. A lot of utilities kind of want to tell that carbon emission story as well. And because, as Kelly mentioned, in the Northwest, our system is a hydro system that is owned and operated by Bonneville Power Administration. So we've got a lot of hydro, and that's great. And it really tells a very powerful carbon emission story. So it's the same kind of math, but we take the fuel consumption mix of the utility, and those numbers are all reported through the California Air Resource Board, or they give us their specific number. And we let the customer kind of input their current ICE vehicle and compare it with an electric vehicle that they would want to purchase and see how little CO2 they're burning compared to an ICE vehicle. Another tool we have is our incentive stacker. And again, this is as granular as we can get it. So this is Lane Electric down in Eugene. You can see the average cost there for an electric vehicle, the federal tax credit, the Oregon State rebate, and we kind of stack it so that the customer can kind of get a sense of what that final price would look like. You can also sort by luxury EV, mid-range, and low-range to kind of get those price breaks math done for you. If you want to wade into the federal IRS website, you can go directly on the links there on the left. Good luck with that. But again, we try to create a one-stop shop for the customer. And tell you, it's daunting when you're looking at actually trying to purchase a vehicle. There's so many models out there. Trying to understand exactly what the savings opportunity looks like and understanding what the cost looks like, et cetera. And that's our next tool. We've done this for Midstate Electric in La Pine, Oregon, which is outside of Bend, where we actually did a call down to every dealership in the area with an 80-mile radius of Midstate Electric service territory to find out which dealers would be willing to partner with us to have their dealership names listed on the utility website as preferred partners for customers that really want to have a good experience when they go to make a purchase. So we're basically trying to create these market tools that a utility customer can get just by going on that utility website. And from kind of learning about range, learning about price savings, learning about incentives, all the way through to finding a dealer where you could buy that car, we really make it so much easier. And I would venture to say we save hours of research time for utility customers that really wouldn't have had any idea where to start in the EV car buying journey. And we found, based on research done by Luth, that most car buyers are spending their 900 clicks of research online before they get to be able to make a decision between two different cars. And 71% of that research is on their phones. So all of our content is mobile ready, and utility customers can look at anything you see here directly on their phones. Here's some charging specific tools that we provide. Upper left-hand corner, we kind of take any level 2 charger that's available in the market today, and we highlight all the key characteristics of it. I want to do a special call out to the Energy Star label. I've been working with EPA for about 14 years, and the Energy Star label should give consumers a high level of confidence because anything with the Energy Star label is UL listed. So there's a degree of safety and reliability there that we've come to know and trust about Energy Star. If there's a Wi-Fi enabled or a cell phone enabled component, we list that as well. We're not pre-selecting favorites here. This is just a very objective list of all of the chargers and their key characteristics. If you scroll down and look again at Midstate Electric, what they do is also provide a list of contractors that are local to their territory and are prepared and ready to help customers get that charger installed in their home. For Clatskanie PUD, we actually helped manage a public charging installation project, and we have information on their website that kind of helps customers understand what they're paying when they charge or plug into those public chargers. So the utility's done a lot of thinking about how they can equitably and fairly price electricity. on these publicly available chargers, and you can see the price difference when you decide to select a fast charging rate versus a slower charging rate. And then finally, we have a public charger locator map, and we train that map directly onto utility service territory. This is actually from the DOE, and it's a free tool. And so we give that free to our utilities. We just make sure we want to have our utility members the confidence that they know where to go and where they can find that public charging that's available. All right, next slide. So this is where I want to kind of provide a little bit of time spending on some definitions here. And this really gets to that grid interaction between chargers and utility rates. And you might have heard of time of use rates. And these rates really kind of vary according to the time of day, season, and even day type. So if it's weekday or weekend or holiday. Pepco, which is in the Mid-Atlantic region, is one of our clients, and they actually have 4 different time of use rates. And so we allow customers to really see how much savings they get when they're actually charging during one of those preferred time of use rates. It's really important, again, if you're going to have those TOUs, that you make sure your customers understand how to take full advantage of them. Kind of the next level up from that are direct load control programs. And this is where utilities really have the ability to cycle appliances like air conditioners, water heaters, on and off during peak demand times. But that can only really happen if there is sophisticated level of metering that's available on that customer's home. And you'd be shocked to know that a lot of utilities throughout the country still don't have AMI metering. They don't have that level of sophistication to really be able to manage that load profile. I think it's coming, but certainly not coming as fast as we might think. It's a pretty heavy investment for utilities to make to switch to AMI metering. But increasingly, I think they're going to see the need to do that so they can effectively manage peaks. So next, this is kind of the next level of grid optimization, if you will, from the utilities perspective, and specifically as it relates to charging. So there's V1G, and that's direct control of charging loads through network chargers to reduce or increase the charging load. And higher rates are charged during those peak demand hours. Typically, peak demand is right between 5 and 7:30. Everyone gets home, cranks up the house for a variety of reasons, and everyone's using their electricity. So that's pretty much the worst time to be charging. And you can see a picture here of a Tesla charger, but it's got that meter on top of the charger so that the utility can kind of see exactly when that thing is being used. And then there's V2G, which is a bi-directional power flow between the EVs and the grid. And this allows utilities to draw power from that stationary vehicle. I would say that there are projects throughout the country that are exploring V2G. I would say that we're still a long way off from this being a pretty prominent strategy for utilities to deploy on their grids yet. I took this slide from Next Navigant. They did a really good job, I think, of kind of outlining the ways that a utility can play in the EV space. They can be infrastructure developers. They can, just as they do poles and wires, they can also own charging equipment in public space. Also, they can interface with charging service providers, where there's different levels of infrastructure management depending on the building type. So if it's a residential, multifamily, if it's a commercial building, et cetera. The next level up, and again, further and farther out, is the cell recharge to EV owners. Maximizes revenues by fixed or flexible tariffs. And then finally, the leverage EVs is batteries on wheels to provide or to balance load and provide ancillary services. Those again are kind of where we'd like to be in the next, I don't know, 5 to 10 years. But right now, some utilities still aren't even telling their members or customers about EVs in any way, shape, or form. So we've got to kind of walk before we can run here. But I thought it was important to kind of outline where I think we could go given how technology is advancing, but it's a matter of kind of putting the investment in and being able to leverage the data bidirectionally to really make the grid optimized. This is just a quick snapshot of, I think, one of the more progressive pilots. Olivine worked to do a report with PG&E and BMW. And I'll just call your attention to the summary of findings and lessons learned that excess supply from renewables will likely become increasingly significant in the future. And as a partially flexible load, EV charging can be shifted to better align with excess supply of renewables, which has a potential to provide value. So there was a test done, I believe this was in 2017. It was a partnership with BMW and Pacific Gas and Electric. Had some pretty compelling results. And I feel like it's a great benchmark for us to be thinking about how to design utility EV programs in the future that really take advantage of some of that excess solar that's available. And finally, this is just a drawing that I found, Yale Environment 360, kind of my dream scenario. You've got the home, you've got the solar, plus the meter. You can count the savings. You got a little storage in the background, in the basement. So I wanted to leave you with a pretty cool representation of what I hope we can all get to at some point. So with that, I'll pause and take any questions, or if not, we can turn it directly over to Carey.
Great, thanks so much, John. Great, I think this is a good time to just launch another quick poll. John was talking a lot about charging, so we'll launch a quick poll. Where would you charge an electric car if you were to get one? Your garage, driveway, on street, or public chargers? So while people are responding to that poll, Zach, do we have any questions that are ready for John?
We do. There was a question, are the differences, I believe this is about the educational tools that you were talking about, John.
Okay.
The differences in maintenance costs between internal combustion engines, the ICE engines, and EVs shown in cost comparisons?
That's a great question. And increasingly utilities, our clients are asking us to see about trying to articulate that the cost of lifetime of the vehicle, particularly compared against ICE. And we feel like besides kind of the data that Kelly put on her slide, it gets a little bit dicey trying to forecast how any individual actually uses their EV. And so we're a little resistant at this point, just because we wouldn't want to put up a number that some individual driver or owner kind of blows through and then feels like they were misled. So we're feeling like it's still kind of hard to predict hard numbers on that. And it to us still seems fairly case by case. I wouldn't question any of the numbers that Kelly put up there. I think those are very good ballpark numbers, but we're not quite there yet where we're going to put up any numbers we're going to have to defend.
Cool. Let me just see the results from our poll. Most people would charge in their garage, some people in the driveway. Nobody charges like me on the street, and a couple public chargers for people who don't have a garage or driveway. Okay.
I've got a couple more questions here.
Okay.
We got a question here about the AMI metering you were talking about, John. Is AMI metering the same as smart metering that Pacific Power does?
Yes, I would say that that's a fair kind of translation. Smart AMI metering. We're pretty lucky. Pacific Core. I'm a Pacific Core customer, and I got my meter, smart meter, and I've got that. So pretty lucky to have it. I believe Portland General also has converted to AMI, but a lot of the public, more rural utilities have not done that yet. So we're still kind of in that phase of getting utilities to tell the EV story, but we're not quite there where they're doing planning for demand response scenarios or V2G scenarios quite yet. So baby steps for more of the rural utilities that kind of are dotted throughout Oregon.
Great. And could you define what does AMI stand for again?
Automated meter, something like that. I'll go back and find it for you.
Okay.
You stumped me. Good
Okay.
one. Good
We'll get
question.
Yeah, too many acronyms in the world. And we have another question just came in. Will level 2 plugs ever be standardized? What adapters are available now?
That's a good question. On adapters, there are some. I would probably yield to WIT as well. I'd have to pull up our charging directory there, but yeah, I would like to see them standardized for sure. It's time to kind of all get on one page. I think that'll save a lot of hassle and headaches. So I'm a big proponent of standardization. I'm old enough to remember VHS and Beta, VHS and Beta. So I remember those wars, and feeling like I'm going through it again here. So I would say that there's value and benefit to standardization. There are adapters out there, but I couldn't point you in the direction of any specifically.
Okay.
Rick, do you want to comment on that?
I can hop on here. So for level 2 charging, what you do at your home or an average public charger that you want to charge over the course of a couple hours, maybe more, is pretty much standardized. Tesla has an adapter that comes with all of their cars to work with your average level 2 charger. However, DC fast charging is very much not standardized. I do think we are heading towards a standardization around the CCS standard. I think it's a little too early to say that definitively, but Tesla went with the CCS standard in Europe as soon as that was the pathway to go forward. And then in the US, I don't know for certain if we'll ever get away from a more than I don't know if we'll ever figure out one, but I do think we are heading towards that, with most major manufacturers producing vehicles that work with CCS, with the exception of Tesla's. And there is not an adapter between Tesla and the CCS, which is what the Bolts and the Nero and the Kona all utilize. Yeah.
Cool. And Rick, could you just define CCS, all these acronyms in the electric world?
It is Combined Charging Standard, and kind of a boring name, but it's the charging standard that all manufacturers are using except for Tesla and Nissan and older cars before 2016 or 17.
Cool. Great.
Great. I've got a couple more questions here. One of them is, despite the fact that my Kia Niro plug-in electric vehicle runs almost exclusively on battery charge, they still advise oil change every 7,500 miles. The internal combustion engine in this car is hardly ever used, but they still advise it. A way to charge more. I think, I'm not sure.
It's more of a comment.
Yeah, but is that an advisable amount of maintenance?
It seems high, and it seems like it's a kind of a, just an effort to kind of keep you coming back somehow, some way. Dealers are struggling across the board, especially with COVID-19 now. But when I talk to dealers, they are losing that revenue stream off the maintenance and the service contracts. So not surprising that they're going to try to max out any type of revenue from even a modicum of service that might be needed on a vehicle. But to me, that seems a little bit much.
Bad for dealers, but good for the general consumer. Let's
Yep.
Let's move on to our final panelist, and we'll if there's any other questions, we'll get to them in the final Q&A. I want to introduce you to Carey Booth. Carey Booth has a PhD in biology and an enthusiasm for the environment. She was an early adopter of electric vehicles and drove a glorified golf cart around town for 8 years and over 10,000 miles. She'll be telling you about that shortly. And she wanted solar panels since the 1970s and finally got them in 2008 and got more in 2019. So here to share her story to close out our panelists is Carey Booth.
Great. Thanks, Joe. Okay, here's a few slides. There's the glorified golf cart. It's actually a little bit better than a golf cart because it had 4 doors and 4 seat belts. Was super cute. It was a 3-wheeler, and it had 6 12-volt lead acid batteries when it was brand new. I did buy it brand new for about $10,000. It had a 20-mile range, and I had researched this car. Actually, it's a 3-wheel motorcycle. That was its classification. I researched it for about 1.5 years before I bought it, and decided that it really was going to do just what I needed it to do. And my ideal was this minimalist vehicle that would do exactly what I needed and not a whole lot more. And what I needed to do is get my kids to school, teach them both how to drive. They both learned how to drive in this thing, and get myself to work. I work 3.5 miles. I work at Reed College, so really close to my house, and stop at the grocery store. I mean, it was perfect for that and super fun. The zebra stripes, I mean, it's called the Zap Zebra. Gets a lot of attention. I called it a driving antidepressant, a 1-car parade. Everywhere you went, people were smiling and waving. And when you drive around in a different car, you start to think, why isn't anyone waving at me anymore? You get to miss it. So this was my main vehicle. I also have a 1992 Toyota Corolla wagon. That car, now my younger daughter is 25 and she's still driving that one. It has about 175,000 miles on it, so I figure it's about halfway to a Toyota lifespan. And I ride my bike a lot. I drive on average about 3,500 miles a year is what I do. So the Zap was great for a while, but it really was very poorly made. Zap was a California company. They had these made in China where the 3-wheel chassis is very popular. And it kind of started falling apart really right from the get-go, but it was okay. I was managing to make it work. And like I say, 8 years, over 10,000 miles, that was my main car. And I loved it, and it was super fun. And it also got a little old. The heater stopped working about 6 months in, and it wasn't worth replacing because it was hardly a heater anyway. So that's what I did. It was a 2007 model. I bought it in early 08, and I bought it new. Then, of course, the next step was to have the solar panels. So these are a little hard to get a picture of. I have to stand all the way across the street and zoom in because they're way up high. My house has an east-west slope, and in 2008, to get 2.7 kilowatts of photovoltaic panels on my house, had to go high up on the west side, not too far back because I have a neighbor with a tree that shades that place. There were a lot of incentives, federal tax credit, state tax credit, energy trust credits, rebates, so many credits. And it barely made any sense financially to do it. And so for me, it was more, I'd been wanting solar panels since I was in high school in the mid-70s, and it was 2008, and that's what I wanted. I wanted solar panels to drive my electric car with, and it was super fun, and it was totally worth it. If you remember the last Great Recession, they called it, I don't know what they're gonna call this one, it seemed like a better investment in my house than in the stock market right then, and I had some savings, so it was a satisfying place to put it. At the same time, I did a few different things. Well, one was a new roof, always a good idea before you go solar. Make sure you have at least 10 years, I think it is, left on the roof. So I put on a new 40-year roof. I have a very small south-facing roof. We use that for solar hot water. And this is the water heater on the inside of the house. There's one closet that has the water heater and the furnace. I also put in a heat pump furnace at the same time. So it was this like major green investment in this house so that I wouldn't have to worry about the roof, the hot water heater, the furnace. It was all going to get done at once. And it worked really well. It was a very satisfying project. The 8 years later, so it was around 2016, the ZAP was really falling apart in ways that even I could no longer ignore. 3 out of the 8 door handles had broken. You could not get parts. They had only made them 06, 07, 08. All the 08s had been recalled and trashed. None of them had the same door handles anyway. There were no parts to be had. And when both the inside and the outside driver's door handles were broken and the entire latch broke, I sort of tied it together, gave it to a good home, and rushed out to test drive the Mitsubishi i-MiEV, and which I've been following since it came out in 2009. And I realized that it was gonna be the next minimalist vehicle that was actually a car. It actually had 4 wheels instead of 3. It actually has airbags. It can go on the freeway. Oh, I forgot to say, the ZAP was governed at 40 miles per hour, roughly, maybe 45 with the tailwind, but the ZAP also had no regenerative braking, the lead acid batteries, the 20-mile range was down to 5 by the time I got rid of it. But I still got to work, and I plugged in at work, and it was only 110 charging. So I managed to test drive a new 2016 i-MiEV, really liked it, but I wasn't in a good position to buy it that year because I couldn't take full advantage of the federal tax credit. $7,500 assumes that you owe that much in taxes that 1 year. You can't roll it over. And I had 2 kids in college, and I was getting some tax credits for that, and it just didn't make sense. That was not the year to buy a new car and to get the full advantage of that. And I also knew that the Oregon rebate was in the works, and they kept saying, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. So I thought, well, what I really want, and I also drove a Chevy Spark, a brand new Chevy Spark, and it kind of came down to, was it the Spark or the i-MiEV, that the Mitsubishi that would, both of them fit in my garage. I have an 1890 house with a very rare garage in the house, and so they both fit, they were both there, but the Spark was really sort of an EV tacked on top of their gas car model, didn't have the cargo space. This one has great cargo space, which is probably what I need it for. I ride my bike if I don't need to carry a bunch of stuff. So the 1 week that I needed this car, Clackamas CarMax had a used 2012 Mitsubishi i-MiEV. It was black, not my favorite color. I was joking with my kids about getting white stripes, but they were like, Mom, enough with the zebra already. And I had to agree. So this is my car now, 62-mile range. It has a port, but no guts for a fast charger. In 2012, these were, it was optional. Now it would have been standard, except after 2016, they stopped selling these new in the US and Canada. They were never popular. I am the only person in the whole US, I guess, who really wants a minimalist vehicle, but I love it. It does have a heated seat for the driver's side. And I met somebody at an EV event who had a 2016 one, and the only change in the model was that the passenger front seat also had a heated seat. So these are pretty popular around the world, just not in the US market, like a more luxury model, but I'm loving it. You can still find them used on CarMax. So that's my next plug in general is for used EVs are a great deal. Platt Auto is one in Portland that I know of, and I've got a couple of friends who have bought cars there and had good experiences. Somebody else was just mentioning Paramount Motors in Seattle sells used EVs and also used plug-in hybrids. So there are ways to buy used EVs. You save a lot. The Chevy Bolt, you know, a couple years later is about half price. You can see here I've got a couple of an older Nissan Leaf and a newer Nissan Leaf, different ranges, different mileages, different prices, but and because of low maintenance, there's just not a lot of wear and tear on these things. So it's definitely worth thinking about if you're trying to, if you're not quite sure to get in brand new with a, you know, $50,000, maybe start slowly with an old Leaf and see how it goes. But in 2019, got enthused. We were on the Goal Zero tour. We are not net zero, but Goal Zero. And went around and saw some of the other people's houses and their projects. And a lot of them were brand new houses built to spec for net zero, passive house, also all the bells and whistles. I have an 1890 house. It's well insulated. We've done a lot of good things with it, but it was time to look at more solar, and this time 7.3 kilowatts. We finished off the west slope, we covered the east slope, and it actually made financial sense. It wasn't just because I wanted them. In the long run, there will be a reasonable payback eventually, but of course that's not why I do it anyway. It's super fun. So there they are, getting ready to install. Here it is on the east side. Here's the extension on the west side. And that's it for the slideshow, and happy to take questions, and really happy to get invited to talk about my enthusiasm for EVs and solar.
Great, thank you. And so I'll just have a quick first question to Carey and Kelly, both who have an EV and solar panels. How does that feel like? You know, does it make any difference when you have your electric car and solar?
It's just so much fun, you know, to just tell people, well, of course they do a double cave. You go, yeah, I drive a solar powered car, and they're kind of imagining the panels on the roof of the car, which of course would not make any sense aerodynamically. And then I say, well, they're on the house, but I generate more than enough electricity to run my car.
Kelly, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's just two good ways to feel good about myself. And, you know, I think we're all moving toward a mindset of reducing overall energy use and doing our best to, you know, reduce the amount of energy that we consume. But if we're able to make that up from energy from the sun, then it's a win-win.
Right. Right. Yeah. And, you know, my point of putting all the solar panels in the house isn't just so we can blast the heat all winter and the AC all summer. We're conserving in a lot of different ways. And if we end up being better than net zero, which it's kind of hard to tell until the end of the year because they just got installed and we're seeing how that goes, that'll be fun. You donate those to PGE. Anything extra goes to their people in need of help with their electric bills. I had a couple things I wanted to say in response to John's talk. I got invited once, well, paid, it was really fun, to go talk about EVs on a panel. It was one of these focus group things, and they were a little cagey about exactly what it was and who was asking all these questions, but they paid us $250. And my joke was my friends would probably pay me that much to stop talking about EVs. But, and it was about this smart grid idea. And would you be comfortable having your car plugged in and letting them pull from your car in the middle of the night if they needed it, but then making sure that you were fully charged by the morning? And I was like, sure, that's a great idea. And I recently, last fall, I guess, signed up with PGE has this new peak time rebate thing. And I have a smart meter, but there was something wrong with my thermostat that it wasn't easy to swap it out to let PGE actually pull from it. But they text me and say, hey, tomorrow, if you could just like not use so much electricity between 4 and 7, we'll give you money back. And, most days we do it, we get $3 or $4 back. And one day we got $25 off of our electric bill. I'm like, whatever we did, that was a good day. So there's these games you can play now, and then in the future, it's all going to be golden, because a lot of it is about that peak. And if we can just shave the peak off, it's like now with COVID, we're flattening the curve. If we could just flatten that peak use, it would help a lot with the whole grid problem.
Carey, did you have to get any additional metering to be able to participate in that program with PGE?
I did not, no, and they'll send me a text and an email, and I can choose how I want to do it. And if I don't feel like doing it that day, I just ignore it. There's no cost to that. And it's awesome. I thought it was a really great, fun tool. Yeah.
No, that's great. It was actually got written up as a pretty innovative pilot relative to other work in the country. And we
Sweet.
talked a lot about communication protocols on those appliances. And when I talk to EPA, I'm trying to tell them, look, a charger is nothing more than an appliance.
Right.
And
right.
if you can leverage the communication protocols that are now being required in some states like Washington to make those appliances talk to each other and back to the grid, then we can kind of get the charger manufacturers up to speed on making sure they're all communication compliant. So there's a lot to learn from demand response programs on other appliances in residential homes. I don't think it's that big of a lift. So glad to hear you had a good experience with it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let me it's hearing Carey's story with her used EVs. Maybe don't think about that Zap car she had in 2007. We've come a long ways, but would you consider buying a used EV? And I'm going to launch that poll real quick, and maybe we can ask a question for the panelists while people are responding to the poll. So somebody asked, how much kilowatt solar setup would be required for charging EVs? And Whit, feel free to join in on this.
I started out with 2.7 kilowatts, which is not that much, really. And of course, I don't drive that much, and I'm only using 110 for my charging, but it was really negligible. Like, you don't even notice a blip on your electric bill. It's so cheap to charge.
Great.
I'd second that.
Great. So you don't need much solar to charge your car. Real quick, I shared most people would consider buying a used EV even after Carey's story of the Zap. Great. Let's see. Question, DC fast charge is only supposed to be used in emergency cases. Any comments from them?
I have heard that it's sort of rough on your car to do a lot of fast charging, but then I've heard other people, guy Chris, who hangs out at Fourth a lot, who was a Uber driver with a Nissan Leaf, and he was fast charging 3 times a day, and he had over 100,000 miles on that thing, and it was fine. And I will say that, with my car, my 2012, is now 8 years old, over 25,000 miles on it. There is not one bit of battery degradation on this thing. The lithium batteries are so different than lead acid. And I've never owned a car that had fast charging capabilities, so I don't know. Somebody else can answer that if they have an opinion about that. Maybe Whit.
Yeah, I would say just DC fast charging and lithium ion batteries have improved so much over the past 5 years even that I can give you an update on Chris. Actually, he updated his car at around 178 or 9,000 miles. His battery was at about 85%, and he fast charged from like 10%-ish to 100% 2 or 3 times a day. So if you also want to play around with it more, you can use the GeoTab tool that I posted in the Q&A section. It's really cool. It's got about 6,000 cars, and I know that they're going to update that when they have more data. Yeah.
Cool. Another question, can you answer or provide a source for learning more about the time it takes in savings to buy an EV when you already have a good running gas guzzling car? How can we justify throwing away or having someone else take over our car when it has usable life and involved fabrication costs that aren't paid out yet? That's a tough question. We get that a lot.
Yeah, you know, I kept my old car and let my younger daughter drive it. It is handy to have a car to go to the mountains. Mine doesn't go that far. Mine won't go to Seattle. So sometimes it's good to have one for around town and one for the longer distance. But if you can afford a Chevy Bolt or a Tesla or a long range Leaf, then you pretty much can go on the road with it. And, you know, sell your old car to a good home, somebody that needs that, and hopefully will keep it running through its life. And but I know, Joe, you've actually said, you know, you're always about like, let's just move on. Let's get to the thing that's going to save the energy and the carbon, and let's just get on with it. So.
Yeah. Kelly, I think Kelly had a slide, and I know her slides pretty well, that talk about there's some manufacturing carbon emissions, but then the life cycle of the carbon emissions happen more in the using of the car. So that's where the majority of the carbon emissions come from. So, yeah, I'm always a fan of, yes. And then there's a lot of other benefits of going EV, where you're supporting charging infrastructure if you make the switch sooner. So you're helping the technology advance. Any other thoughts on that from the panelists?
No, I think you have to kind of do an analysis on your own about, you know, what that car can still do. And I think what Corey said is great. Carey, if there's somebody that can still use it and would need it, then it's still serviceable. There are emissions still attached to that vehicle, though. So it's not an easy answer. And I think everybody has to kind of come to their own conclusions about that.
Remember when there was the Cash for Clunkers program? The federal government, this was probably Obama era, was like, hey, we'll pay you guys for your old cars so that we can get them off the road and get people into cars with better miles per gallon situation. And it was so popular that they had to stop. They like ran out of money. And I was wishing we could have that again just for all internal combustion engine cars. Hey, we'll give you this incentive if you want to get an EV. So there's an election coming up. Could go in our favor.
You can keep politics out of this. Let's keep moving. Let's try to get our questions, and we'll do a couple more minutes, and then we'll close and answer any other unanswered questions in follow-up. You mentioned wanting solar since you were in high school, Carey. Who or what was it that got you interested in clean energy?
You know, I just got enthused about Earth Day. I think the first Earth Day I was about 13, and I got enthused, and I just kept thinking about it and reading about it. And I know my freshman year in college, I actually took a class where we learned about alternative energy sources. And then I took a year off and I volunteered at this place in Berkeley called the Integral Urban House, and they had passive solar design and organic gardens and a aquatic aquaponics thing going. They had everything. And so I just kept thinking, I want that house someday. And it just took a really long time to get to a place in my life where that became the priority, and I had the house that it was going to work on. And so yeah, look up Integral Urban House. I think there's a Wikipedia page about it somewhere, and it was there for a time. The house is still there in Berkeley. It's not that institute anymore, but it was inspiring. And you know, there was the whole Jimmy Carter thing. He put them on the White House, and then Reagan took them off. And so it's been in my consciousness for a long time.
Great. Lindsay wants to know if anyone has storage batteries in case of a power outage for solar panels. And if people have that, they can, any of the panels have batteries.
That is an expensive addition. One thing I did get with my new panels is I have a single outlet with a switch. And if the grid goes down and the sun is up, that outlet could charge my phone. And there was some debate about whether or not it could charge my car. Maybe, it's 110. but that is a new like $500 addition that you can get when you have your panels put on, but it's only when the sun is shining. And I thought, well, you know, if the grid goes down, I could be popular with my neighbors. We could all charge our cell phones on that one outlet someday.
Great. Good stuff. Let's see. How much solar is needed directly proportional to the number of miles driven? Is there a rough watts of PV to miles average?
I have not done that calculation.
I haven't either.
It depends on your location and it depends on a bunch of things, but I would argue if you have good solar exposure, you're in the Pacific Northwest, it really depends, and you drive 10,000 miles and you have a car that has XYZ. There's a lot of factors. The calculations aren't necessarily like calculus level, but there's a couple, I think there's some tools online that can help with that. Joe, you might know more about that than I do.
Out on this stuff, and you think electricity is measured in kilowatt hours, and that is, but 1 kilowatt hour, usually you can get about 4 miles of driving per year. So Carey and Kelly, do you guys know how many kilowatt hours your solar panels produce, to put you on the spot?
So I have like my panels rate at about 10 kilowatts of panels, and in Portland with my aspect, because it's east-west and not south, I'm never generating more than about 7-ish at a time.
And do you know how many?
You just sort of multiply that by 1,000 and call it good for the year or something. Mm-hmm. Yeah, seems to be the rough equivalent.
So if you produce like, say, 6,000 kilowatt hours a year, that's like the average system size, and you times that by 4, you could drive 24,000 miles in your electric.
That's a lot.
And that's the average.
You ride your bike more if you're driving that much.
Yeah.
I think an average commute is 10,000 miles.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So
an annual commute, not one day.
So an average solar panel system would more than meet your all your driving needs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. How can a country like India, we just got 2 more questions, then we'll close, handle transition from ICE engine to electric vehicle? A tough one. Anyone have any thoughts?
I actually was talking to some OEMs in India through LinkedIn of all places, and it seemed to me that they were looking at ways to start, adding electric vehicles into their offerings. Tata Motors is the OEM there in India, one of the largest ones. They also, from what I could tell, were getting some scrutiny on some of the cars they were building right at the time we were talking to them about how to educate their consumers around savings for EVs. I would be really interested to know in India if there would be, if the utilities there would see value in having that additional load, or if they're fairly constrained from a grid perspective already. My sense is they're pretty heavy coal fired generation in India, so it's still kind of a trade-off. I'm not sure what the hydro system looks like in that country, but if I were to try to figure out kind of a launch plan, I'd start with the utilities to see what kind of infrastructure they wanted or could or were planning to build to support public charging and residential charging, et cetera. That's how I would go about it.
Great. We got one last question. Does anyone have a Tesla house battery or similar system, and can energy from a house battery be used to charge an EV without having to go through an outside system?
I don't have one, but my understanding of the house battery is it's, gonna run your house, and anything you plug into whatever outlets it's supplying. So I'm sure it could. Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely the case with the battery system. And kind of linking back to the question about how much PV do you need, how much solar do you need to charge your car? Well, you don't need any solar, and you can have any amount of solar and also have an electric vehicle, and there's never going to be a compatibility issue there. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So get solar, get an electric vehicle. We're going to close. We're a little over, but thank you all so much for joining us. I want to thank my panelists, John, Carey, and Kelly, and Whit. Thanks, Zach, for being on here tonight. I'm going to share my screen and share their email addresses so you can email them individually if you'd like. But I want to thank again all our panelists in this great discussion. Join us for our Basics of Solar presentation on Earth Day on Wednesday at 12 p.m. Thank you all so much and have a great evening.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.